All right, welcome to the Barrett and Baxa podcast. Here we are for another go around at this, and we're glad you guys are with us. My name is Bob Baxa, and that
is Steve Barrett sitting on the other side with his big red Wisconsin
Nice.
shirt because I'm a little bit embarrassed to be living in Minnesota at the moment. So I'll wear my Wisconsin shirt, which is where I graduated from high school. So I'll be a
All right, very
Wisconsinite
cool.
today.
Very good. All right, we're going to jump right in and talk about Donald Trump, of course. I mean, who is there anybody in the country that goes a day without, whether they love Trump or hate Trump? Is there ever a day that goes by where people are not talking about Donald Trump? I would say no.
Isn't that crazy? People are obsessed with the topic. He's got to be the most he has to be the most talked about person in history, I would think.
Or the person
except for Jesus. You got Jesus.
Okay, and then
Jesus
Trump
is up here, but
is there anyone in the country who says Donald Trump? I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on Donald Trump. Does anyone say that? I mean, this guy is the strongest, he has the strongest feelings about him of any human being that has ever lived in my lifetime. I mean, I think, you look at Ronald Reagan, there were people that were like, people loved Reagan, people hated Reagan, but I think there were people that were just like, I don't know, I really never really gave Reagan much thought. Is there anyone who says, I don't know how I feel about Trump, I haven't really thought about it? That person does not exist, dude.
Yeah,
I mean,
and even as
feels something.
Even as somebody who's basically kind of in the middle, even though the middle now is even right.
On the right,
but
yeah.
I got to tell you, I know people who have friends that the lifelong friends. You're one of them. We talked about it on one of the other episodes. But
Right.
I know people who have friends that tell them, I don't want to be friends with you anymore because you support Trump, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I got to say, maybe I've heard it a few times, but not nearly as often. People saying, oh, I don't want to be friends with you because you don't like Donald Trump or you didn't vote for Donald Trump.
I don't think that's a thing. I mean, maybe it is somewhere, but it's not nearly as prevalent. I mean,
I think it's silly either way. Either way,
is.
it is absolutely ridiculous. If you choose your friends based on your politics, I think that is where you're an idiot. I don't think liberals are idiots. I don't think Republicans are idiots. But I think if you choose your friends based on the polarization, you're kind of an idiot.
The thing that's most funny now, because the newest narrative now is that Donald Trump has given up all control and Elon Musk is the president.
But I thought he was going to be a dictator.
Wasn't that like 5 minutes ago that he was going to be a dictator on day one? So you just had a narrative that Trump is going to be a dictator. He's going to run for office a third time. I mean, we were talking about that. He's not going to he's going to, abuse power. And then they pivoted 180 degrees on day one. Yeah. And now it's that he has no power. He's given up co-president to Elon Musk. So how do you pivot that?
And it's not just Elon Musk. It's always, Trump, they're fighting against Trump and Tom Homan. If it's immigration, they're fighting against him and the border czar, or him and Linda McMahon if it's education, or him and Elon Musk if it's government money saving.
How is a dictator giving up power to all these people? It's just insane how they will change the narrative immediately. Just at the drop of a hat, they'll change their whole narrative. I just feel like something about Trump has just broken their brains.
And the media they don't know what to do. The left wing media, I should say, when something for example, just a couple of weeks ago, the biggest story out there was the blow up in the Oval Office between Trump, Zelensky, and Vance, right? Yeah. And now talks are back on. They're back communicating. Everything seems normal to be fine. So that's just what happens behind closed doors, and we just happen to see it out in the open. Mostly because Zelensky, I think, wanted it to be out in the open in that Oval Office meeting, and he didn't get the reaction. I mean, he kind of did get the reaction because the media flipped out. Left-wing media flipped out over that and said, "Oh my gosh, look at what happened. He's just ruined everything." Right? Well, he really didn't, and now we're back on, and so now they don't want to know what to say about that. That leads us to one of the other topics that we had on the list today, which is this whole idea of in the United States, do our rights come from government or do they come from God?
Right.
And clearly, the
Love that.
Constitution lays it out that our rights come from God, and that's why they cannot be taken away by the government.
Exactly.
And that's basically the foundation of the nation that we've created. And so I always think of it as, well, if you don't, let's say you don't believe in God at all, then where do the rules come from? Because in the
Where did your
natural
rights come from?
world, where dogs, wolves out in the wild and lions and tigers and bears, they
Oh
don't
my.
they don't think about God when they are chasing down another animal or
Right.
allowing the weakest animal in their pack to be attacked, by the hyenas as the rest of the
Exactly.
pack runs away. They don't go back and, they do to some extent, but basically it's survival of the fittest in the wild.
Yes.
So if we're not going to believe in God and that there are certain rules that we as human beings, something separate from the other animals, if there aren't certain rules that we abide by because we believe in God and because God does truly exist, then why don't we just go back to killing each other whenever we feel like it, raiding each other's communities, raping, pillaging, burning, torturing? Why don't we do all of that?
There's
Well,
no
we
reason
don't
not to.
do all of that because we're not animals and we're not just letting our natural instincts. Because look, I worked in the news business long enough that I know that there are humans out there and their natural instinct is violence.
Yes.
And their natural instinct is brutal violence. They will beat up their wife. They will beat their children. They will beat their elderly parents. They will kill their enemies. They will plot to murder their wife. That you see it every day on the
Right.
news.
Yeah.
But yet we can't say to ourselves, hey, the reason that these rules exist that we don't do this is because we believe in God and God has given us commandments that say, you're humans, you are separate from the other animals on the earth, and you just don't do that.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I think this is the main difference between liberals and conservatives. I think liberals think that the government gives you rights, and that's bullshit. The Constitution doesn't give you rights. The Constitution spells out what the government can't do. Your rights are given to you by God. The right to free speech comes from God. The right to bear arms to defend yourself, that is an inherent right given to you by God. And the Constitution lays out how government may not restrict your speech. The Constitution doesn't give you the right to free speech. That comes from God. I have the right to say what I want. That comes from God. And because of the Constitution of the United States, the US government cannot restrict my free speech. You don't give me the fuck you. You don't give me the right to speech. That's mine. I already had that. The government didn't give me shit. There's a judge, Trump banned males from being housed in female prisons. There's multiple cases in California. 2,200 California inmates have declared that they are now female. Now, seems to me if I'm in prison and I go, wait a minute, I could be housed with women if I just say I'm a woman? Like, okay, where's the catch? And there's been rapes, there has been sexual assaults, there's been female prisoners getting pregnant because clearly these men are, they're not stupid. They're just gaming the system. And Trump ordered a stop to that. There's a judge who has put a temporary halt on Trump's order and has said that there's two particular inmates that are males. They identify as female. They were in a female prison. Trump ordered them moved back to the male, and they sued. Of course, it's the ACLU suing on their behalf. They, it's as is always the case. It's activist lawyers getting involved. And same thing as the girl in the locker room. They were told that the judge was told these men are not comfortable in a men's prison because the male inmates harass them. And again, okay, what about the female prisoners who are not comfortable having a person with a penis in their cell with them, sexually assaulting and raping them at night? Their feelings don't matter. All that matters is the feelings of the transgender person. And this whole issue, I think, is a big part of why Trump won. This is a 90-10 issue. Uh, Certainly, it's an 80-20 issue. I think it could be 90-10, that people do not want these people who are males. Even if they say they're female, they don't want them in women's locker rooms, and they do not want them in women's prisons. It's just not fair to the women. I mean, what's the point of having women's spaces if I can just say, oh, now I'm a woman and I'm allowed in? Well, then there is no women's space. If I can just go in there for any old reason,
Right.
I mean, then there is no women's space.
Well, it happened again in I forget the state just recently, but it's this 400-meter race.
Oh, I
and
think that is the
transgender girl.
It might be California. Yeah.
Yeah, the transgender girl runs out ahead of everyone, breaks a record.
Yes, that's called a boy.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
But that's
and broke a record. Yeah.
Broke a
It's
record.
fucking crazy. How is that fair?
Bob, I have a question. What in the world ever happened to all the drones over New Jersey? Did they just go away?
That's a good question,
they left?
right? They just disappeared. Everyone was so freaked out. And then the story, there's so many stories.
And it was
like
the
this.
biggest story in the entire month of December.
Every night, everyone was losing their shit. And
Yeah.
now it's just gone? Like, how is that possible? Was it ever real?
No, I know
have a good
how
theory.
it's possible.
Go ahead.
I don't even think it's a theory anymore. My theory at the time was that one area of the country was chosen for an experiment. And if you go back, in fact, I think I called it up. It was like 3 days after Trump took office. Caroline Leavitt came out and said, yes, all of these flights were approved by the FAA and were being done as research. I think the research was simply this, a psyop to see how much a community would put up with drones flying overhead, whether it be for policing by drones or pizza delivery by drones. It was simply an operation just to see how long it would take for a community to notice that, hey, outside my window, there's been a drone flying, 400 yards away from my property for all night long, every night for, 10 nights in a row. It's been sitting right there. And I think they found out that pretty quickly, Americans are going to say, we're not going to put up with that.
Right.
So policing by
sounds
air and monitoring
reasonable.
people that way, that kind of surveillance, I think pretty quickly they said, yeah, we're not going to be able to do that.
Right.
But had it gone the other way and no one noticed, then, let's let the sheriff's office just fly a drone over your house whenever and just police with an automatic drone taking pictures of everyone. I mean, you remember when red light cameras came out?
Yes.
It was a huge uproar. Everyone said, oh my God, no,
Privacy
we can't
issues.
allow this. Privacy issues. You can't take pictures of us as we drive through red lights. There's no way. And you certainly cannot let a camera capture your license plate and report your license plate and issue you an automatic ticket based on that license plate. Well, eventually we got used to it.
Yeah.
I think they're
now it's just normal.
Trying to do the same thing with drones. See if eventually Americans will get used to it and just allow us to do it.
I think we will. I mean, we've accepted everything else. We accept. I don't even think people think of. If you had said to people like 50 years ago, "Hey, can I give you this device and you carry it around in your pocket and the government can track every single place you go? If you're cheating on your wife, the government will know that you went to your girlfriend's house and the government will literally be able to monitor you in real time." People would have been like, "No, I'm not carrying that. That's insane." And now everyone does carry it. I mean, you're carrying a tracking device in your pocket voluntarily everywhere you go.
And we believe that all it takes is some judge to say, okay, yes, you can have a search warrant and you can search their history on their telephone and see what cell towers they pinged in what part of town, and they can identify where you've been. But I think it goes beyond that. I think that there are people watching us and what we do. I don't happen to do anything that's that crazy. So if they want to watch what I'm doing,
so bored.
Yes, I went and went to the car wash today. That's
I went to the gym
as
and
much
came
as you're
home.
going to get.
And waited for the Barrett and Baxton podcast to start. And now after this, I'm going to go watch March Madness. That is one of my only sporting events that I really love, March Madness.
So you're not a big sports guy. You're just kind
No,
of a specific sports guy.
college. I do like college sports, and I loved I love how the college football playoffs are now 12 teams, and of course we have a daughter at Arizona State, so they were in the playoffs this year. It was very exciting. That was amazing. That was awesome. And then of course March Madness is great. I mean, 64 teams. And it's a tournament. And then after the first day, there's only 32, and then 16, 8, 4, Final Four. It's very exciting. And I remember during COVID, they did the March Madness without the crowd. They just had the game in an empty gym, and literally within 30 seconds, I was like, I turned it off. The whole point of college basketball is the crowd and the students going crazy and the band. And without that, it was just some guys playing basketball. It was horrible. It was shockingly bad without the crowd.
I seem to remember that they even tried to put either like little cutouts of people or like virtual
so
people in the stands. And it
so
just
dumb.
looked so. The things
No,
that we did during
not the same.
COVID,
Oh God, we
we're
could
going to
do an
look back
entire
at
show about
those
that.
and we're going to laugh our asses off. You know, it brings me to one of my thoughts on the media. I said to you the other day that COVID sort of made medicine like the media. You know, in journalism and in the media, you don't know who to trust. So you go to one side or you go to the other. And that's just
Right,
where you do. It's like sitting in the stands. You sit in your section where everybody's wearing your jersey, and you don't sit in
right,
the other section with the wrong jersey on, right?
right.
Medicine's kind of become the same thing. You don't know what to trust. Like, can you trust this shot that you give yourself? Can you trust that pill that you're taking? Can you trust medicine at all? And you have some doctors telling you, oh, absolutely, this works perfectly. And other doctors saying absolutely not. You know, I have a condition in my hands called Dupuytren's contracture, and
Okay, I've heard of that.
all the time I see this ad for a particular product that I'm not going to name so that we don't get
Right.
sued over it.
Yeah.
But I had two choices. Both of my hands were bad. Both of my hands were like this just a few
Right.
years ago, and I couldn't open them up.
Right.
So I used a non-surgical method on my right hand, and then I had good old school surgery on my left hand.
Huh.
Then this new, brand new, fancy non-surgical injection that they sold me on was the most brutally painful,
Wow.
horrible, torturous thing I've ever had done in my life. And I've been injured badly a number of times. I've
Right.
been in a lot of pain. I've never had
Yes, we
anything
know.
so painful in my life. And so on my left hand, the second hand I had done, I said, go back, give me a scalpel and a good old fashioned doctor and let him cut my hand open and do it that way. I don't need the
Huh.
newfangled stuff. So
Right.
it's an example of you can't trust what they tell you because this doctor stood there and told me, oh, this doesn't hurt at all. It's going to be fine. Even your insurance covers it. But it was super expensive for my insurance
And
company.
do you know that guy here, that's the thing. Do you have any idea, any knowledge or of whether or not that guy, that doctor is getting some sort of kickback for each time he recommends this procedure? And I would bet that he is
I
probably.
I don't know it for a fact, but based on how much he promoted this to me, I would say that absolutely these doctors are getting kickbacks for recommending this very expensive product.
Oh, definitely. I mean, why wouldn't he? I don't even necessarily blame the doctor. And I really think COVID opened our eyes to this when you discovered that doctors will say whatever their funding source tells them to say. So, you had a group of doctors that come out and say the XYZ vaccine is perfectly safe. And then a month later, a story comes out, oh, the XYZ Corporation had actually funded that study. And each of those doctors had received $1 million from the XYZ Corporation. And so you're right. I don't know how you're supposed to trust anything because everyone seems to be getting money from somewhere. It's always about the money. Everything is about the money. And how
Yeah.
do you know that your doctor, when he says get this expensive surgery, brought to you by the Smith Corporation, how do you know that he's not on the Smith Corporation payroll? I mean, you don't. How would you?
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
So what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, what are we
I don't know
supposed to
who to
do?
trust. I don't know. It's very difficult.
So So, Bob, one of the things that I keep doing on the podcast, I keep talking about things that we say, well, we'll get to that in another episode. And I keep forgetting the things
Right.
that we're supposed to get to in another
Right.
episode. And one of the things that I brought up a couple of episodes ago, and I forgot to, lay it into the next episode,
Yeah.
was some of the experience that you had at the Salvation Army when you were in
Oh, yeah.
recovery.
Yep.
And there was a particular story that I just thought was heartbreaking. And, you always think about when it comes to drug addiction, how the hell did they end up doing that? And you think, oh, they started partying in high school and then they
Right.
really started partying in college. And then in their 20s, they kept going and it was just their own fault and they spiraled downhill. But
Yeah.
you met a particular person, we'll never name them, but you met
Right.
a particular person that it started in this
Crazy.
insane way.
Yeah. I was a truck driver. Once I made it through the program, I became a truck driver for the Salvation Army. And that was kind of the first time I was, and this is just this, not a very large box truck. You don't need a CDL for it. And our job was to go out into the community to 20, 30, 40 different people's houses and pick up donations. So you would get a helper, and the helper was a guy who was still in the program. So, and I had just graduated the program. So he and I were exactly the same. I was just 6 months ahead of him in my journey to get off drugs. And so I looked at it as a great opportunity to talk to these guys and just to, even just from the point of view, you're riding in a truck with another human being. I mean, you can sit there in silence or you can talk to the person. I am known to be a talker. And so I would engage these guys and ask them different things. And the amount of heartache that I heard about, like this particular guy, he told me about how he has a clear memory of when he was like 4 or 5. His parents were partiers, and there would be all these beer cans around the house, and everyone would be passed out. And he can remember he would get up in the morning and he would go drink the little bit of, swill that's in the bottom of a beer can, but it's still alcohol. And I mean, it's a 5-year-old kid drinking it. And he would get a little bit drunk from drinking 20 different, one swallow worth of beer. And his parents would find out, they would see him maybe, and they would laugh and think it was funny and cute. Or even
Mhm.
at the party, he'd be getting sips of beer from people. And then it graduated from there. He tells me that when he was about 7 or 8 years old, maybe 9, his mother shared a joint with him. And I was like, wait, what? Are you kidding me? And he said it just matter of factly, like I'm talking right now. Yeah, my mom, probably when I was like 8, she gave me my first joint. And I'm like, whoa, dude, this is not normal. Like, that's child abuse. That's illegal, first of all. It's
Right?
child abuse. And he just told it matter of factly. And then that's not even where it didn't end there. And this same guy, he's like, yeah, she gave me my first joint when I was maybe 8 or 9. And then I think I was like maybe 10, maybe 9, 10, 11, somewhere right in there. I remember she gave me heroin for the first time. And I'm like, what? Heroin? He's like, yeah, she didn't shoot me up right away. I'm like, oh, well, at least she's a good mother. She only lets you snort the heroin the first time she gives it to you. She didn't want to get high by herself. She would be shooting up. First of all, shooting up in front of a 10-year-old child. Think about that. I mean, she
Yeah.
could have died right in front of him. Anytime you shoot up, you could die.
Yeah.
And then to give him some of the powdered heroin and tell him to snort it. How do you say to a 10-year-old, take this
Sniff
drug
this
and
up your nose.
snort it up your nose? I mean, and he told me just totally matter of factly, like it was no big deal. And it just blew my mind. And then there was another guy who told me that his mother used to lock him in the bedroom closet, and she would there was a lock on the outside. She'd put him in there to punish him. And then she would pass out from heroin, or it could have even been alcohol. Don't remember the exact situation. And he'd be stuck in the closet for like 24 hours, and he'd have to, defecate and urinate in the closet, and no food, and he's starving. And then finally his mother would come to, and she would let him out. And this was a regular occurrence. And another guy, his mother used to put the cigarette out on his arm as punishment. And these stories that I would hear were unbelievable. And it really occurred to me, I think a lot of our problems in society can be traced to bad parenting. I mean, go to a prison
Yeah.
and see how many of the guys had a loving, caring, nurturing childhood. What percentage of convicted murderers in prison had a loving childhood? I'd be willing to bet. I mean, I'm sure they've studied this. It's got to be pretty low.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you have a mother who's putting out cigarettes on your arm, how do you not become a murderer? I mean, how,
Well,
how
at
do you
least how do
not
you not
become a
become a
drug addict?
drug addict? You
Yeah,
know,
it's
maybe you don't
crazy.
take it all the way to murder, but I think it sheds a lot of light on the way that we think of drug addicts. You
Right.
know, you tend to look at it like, well, it's your own fault, right? And
Absolutely.
in a lot of cases, it's not their fault. I mean, when
Well,
somebody's shooting you up or giving you heroin to snort or
I know.
whatever at
Yeah.
10 years old, being a drug addict isn't your fault anymore.
No, it's
You
not
know,
much of a choice. I mean, it's all you know, going back to that point. Now, having said that, I do not believe the whole drug addiction is a disease thing. I know that that is the accepted medical way to look at it. I do believe that every person does have the choice within them to get off drugs. I know that is true. And that is part of what I would tell people. If you have someone struggling in your family with drug abuse, and you want to, and I've had people say to me, what can I do to get my son off drugs? And the answer is nothing. You can't do anything to get your son off drugs. Your son has to get himself off drugs. All getting clean comes from within your brain. Because, and I used to say this to the guys in the program, I used to teach what was called a level 1 class. It was just a class at night there at the Salvation Army for the guys who had just come in the program. And I would say to them, if you're sitting here saying to yourself, I really want to get clean. I hate my drug abuse. I want to get clean, but I just don't know how to get clean. We can help you. We will show you how to get clean. But if you're sitting here right now saying to yourself, man, I don't even have a problem. I'm only here because the judge made me come here. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't want to get clean. I want to keep doing drugs. Then there's nothing we can do, because we can't lock you up to force you from the, even you can lock people in prison. But if you're trying to get your child off of drugs, you could lock him in his bedroom, but as soon as you let him out, he's going to go get drugs. He has to decide in his brain that he's had enough. And, that's what I had decided. I had enough. And that's why I stopped doing drugs. But if you haven't decided you've had enough yet, then nothing that anyone says to you is going to make you stop. It's just that simple.
and if you have decided that you have had enough, there's always the Salvation Army.
Absolutely. Just in any city you live in. In fact, let me tell you guys this. Any city you live in, just Google Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Center. And they're in every large city. Or, I mean, in Florida, it's Orlando, Jacksonville, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, St. Pete, and Tampa. So those cities that I just
That
named,
kind of covers the
everyone
whole
in,
state.
that covers the whole state. And in other states, like I live in the Washington, D.C. area. There's one in Washington. It's in Hyattsville, Maryland. That's the Washington, D.C. one. There are multiple ones in New York City. There's multiple ones in Philadelphia. If you go out west, there's one in St. Louis, Kansas City. There's always going to be one within an hour or two drive. Find out the number, call them up, ask for the intake counselor. That's the guy who handles taking in new people. Ask him if they have, you call him up, the guy will talk to you. That guy is always, just by nature of being in that job, he's going to be a helpful, nice person who wants to get people off drugs, or else he wouldn't be in that job. And tell him your situation. If you're the addict, tell him, what your situation is. If there's an addict that you're trying to get help for, find out if they have a bed available. And if they do have a bed, you can check in, whenever the bed is ready. If it's ready that day, you could probably check in tomorrow. And it's free rehab. And they're in every major city in the United States. So don't ever think that lack of money can stop you from going to rehab. The Salvation Army orders free rehab. And not only is it free, on Friday, they give you, in week 1, they give you $7 just so you can get a candy bar out of the candy machine. And then every week you get $1 more. You get $8 in week 2, $9 in week 3, all the way up till you get to the point of $20. And then you stay at 20 for the rest of the time there. And it's called, I think they call it an honorarium. And it's just so you have a couple of bucks in your pocket if you want to buy coffee, you want to buy cigarettes, you want to buy a soda. I mean, these are people that come in homeless. They have nothing. So having even $5 or $10 or $15 in your pocket, makes things a lot better. And you'll get that. So not only is it free, but they actually give you money so you can, buy little things while you're in there. And they will get you clean. If you want to get clean, they will get you clean.
Well, good. I hope that that advice helps somebody out there, or somebody hears it that knows somebody that could use that help, because
Yeah,
it's real help. All
absolutely.
right. Well, I think we've run up against some of the time limits that we have set for ourselves, because you and I could sit and talk forever
Yeah, we
if
do.
we were allowed to.
Half the time we'll do a show but just on the phone, and we're like, wait a minute, we're
We
doing a
didn't
show,
record
but
that.
nobody can see it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. We forgot to record that one.
forgot to record.
All right. Well, Bob, you have
Thanks,
a good
guys.
rest of your day.
Absolutely. You too, my brother.
All right. Don't forget to subscribe to us. We're now up on Spotify, YouTube, Apple. So we're just about at Rumble. We're just
Rumble.
about
Yeah.
everywhere now.
Yep.
So we'll be on Blue Sky soon.
No.
That's the liberal form of Twitter.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that.
Oh, come on, Bob. Let's get up
Nah,
on Blue
maybe.
Sky.
Why not?
They'll
We need
love us
libs.
on Blue Sky.
That's true.
They'll love you for sure on Blue Sky.
Right.